For 15 years, Alex was the backbone of his family's plumbing business, Wilson Family Plumbing. He skipped college to stay behind and help his father grow what was once a one-man operation into a thriving company with 12 employees and a fleet of 8 trucks. From late-night emergencies to complicated installations, Alex did it all. He didn't just fix pipes, he built a reputation. Customers knew him by name, trusted his work, and returned because of the service he personally provided. Yet, through all those years of sacrifice, loyalty, and hard work, Alex was never truly recognized. While his father, Earl, took a step back and enjoyed the perks of being the owner, Alex was the one in the trenches, training new hires, streamlining operations, and managing clients. Meanwhile, his younger brother Travis, who joined the company 5 years ago, was the complete opposite. Immature, unreliable, and underqualified, Travis routinely left jobs unfinished and showed up late, if at all. Yet somehow, Earl always made excuses for him. Alex was told that Travis just needed more time, or that Alex's natural talent was simply making it look easy. Still, Alex stayed, holding on to the hope that someday, all his dedication would be rewarded. His father had promised him partnership for years, dangling ownership like a carrot that never arrived. But when Travis was gifted a brand new company truck, one that Alex had been promised for months, as an engagement present, something inside Alex broke. It wasn't just about the truck, it was about 15 years of being overlooked, undervalued, and used. The truck, like so many things, had become a symbol of a deeper truth. No matter how much he gave, Alex would always be the workhorse, while Travis would always be the golden son. That night, as Alex sat in his aging, rusted-out truck, his mobile office for over a decade, he realized that loyalty to people who don't value you isn't noble. It's self-sabotage. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a life where he didn't work overtime for praise that never came. A life where he was respected from day one, not just after the business crumbled without him. And with that realization, Alex decided it was time to walk away. When Alex finally handed in his 2-week notice, the reaction was exactly what he expected, and exactly why he was leaving. His father, Earl, dismissed it as an emotional overreaction to a misunderstanding about the new truck. But Alex wasn't walking away over a vehicle. He was walking away from 15 years of broken promises, unpaid loyalty, and invisible contributions. He'd been promised a partnership that never came. He'd designed the systems that made Wilson Family Plumbing more efficient. He'd handled the toughest clients, trained the new hires, and worked more weekends than he could count. But the reward? Watching his underqualified brother Travis, who barely showed up for work, get praised, overpaid, and handed the very things Alex needed to do his job. Even when Alex gave his notice professionally and calmly, focusing on the need for growth and respect, his father scoffed. "You'll be back in a week," Earl said, refusing to even ask about the new job Alex had secured. That arrogance only confirmed what Alex had long suspected. His father never thought he would leave because he'd conditioned Alex to stay. Loyalty had become a leash, but this time Alex was cutting it loose. The truth was, Alex had options, good ones. A competitor had already offered him a 40% salary increase, full benefits, and a clear path to partnership. More importantly, they respected him. They wanted him to lead a commercial division, something his father always said was too risky. With a sense of dignity, Alex spent his last 2 weeks training others, organizing client records, and preparing a seamless transition. He wasn't out for revenge, just peace. And when Travis pulled him aside in a panic, confessing that he didn't know half of what Alex did, Alex offered no comfort. Travis had reaped the rewards of Alex's work for too long. Now, he could face the reality of it. For the first time in years, Alex left the office with his head high, not as the loyal son chasing approval, but as a man who finally knew his worth and was ready to build a future on his own terms. In his final 2 weeks at Wilson Family Plumbing, Alex operated with a quiet sense of purpose. He wasn't burning bridges, he was paving his own road. Rather than walk out with resentment, he chose professionalism. Every client note, system login, and procedural detail was documented in a binder labeled Essential Operations. He trained the remaining team members, introduced clients to new techs, and ensured there would be no excuse to call him once he was gone. This wasn't just about leaving, It was about drawing a clear boundary between who he had been and who he was becoming. While Alex worked on his exit, his father and brother remained in denial. Earl still believed Alex would come crawling back, and Travis, unprepared and overconfident, didn't understand the full weight of what was happening. But Alex saw it coming. For years, he had run the operations like clockwork, the glue holding together a business that didn't value him. Now, that structure was being removed, and everything began to crack. Almost immediately after Alex left, the company spiraled. Yelp ratings plummeted. Clients called in furious after botched jobs. The scheduling system Alex had built fell apart, and Travis, now fully exposed, was drowning in responsibilities he never took seriously. Desperate, both Earl and Travis began texting Alex, first with small questions, then with panic. But Alex had already given them everything they needed. If they couldn't handle it, that was no longer his problem. Meanwhile, Alex was thriving. At Brighton Plumbing, he wasn't just accepted, he was celebrated. His ideas were respected, his time was valued, and his leadership was embraced. And for the first time in years, he had evenings off, weekends free, and a future that felt like his own. He wasn't shackled to loyalty anymore. He was building something on his terms. Watching Wilson Family Plumbing stumble without him didn't fill Alex with revenge. It filled him with clarity. They hadn't realized what they had until it was gone. And Alex? He was never going back. 3 months after Alex's departure, the full collapse of Wilson Family Plumbing was undeniable. Revenue had plunged by over 60%, 3 service trucks had been sold, and the once thriving company was reduced to a skeleton crew. Even more telling, Earl had mortgaged his home in a desperate bid to inject cash into the failing business, while Travis, stripped of his usual bravado, was buckling under the pressure. Gone were the smug smiles and flashy promises. In their place stood 2 men clearly overwhelmed by a reality they were never prepared to face. When Alex agreed to meet them at a neutral coffee shop, he wasn't expecting vindication, just closure. But the sight of his father looking disheveled and Travis clearly sleep-deprived struck him harder than he'd anticipated. For the first time, Earl openly admitted his mistakes, sliding a folder across the table with a formal offer: 45% partnership, full operational control, and a substantial salary increase. The gesture was significant, but for Alex, it came too late. He listened without malice as Travis confessed how much he'd underestimated the work. "I thought Dad was giving you all the glory," Travis muttered, "but I had no idea how much you were really doing." There was no pleasure for Alex in watching them fall apart, but there was strength in holding his ground. "I'm not here for revenge," he said. "I just finally learned to value myself the way you never did." Instead of returning, Alex offered practical suggestions. A list of reliable plumbers they could try hiring, advice on streamlining operations, and which clients to prioritize to rebuild. He wasn't interested in salvaging a legacy that had only used him. He was focused on building something of his own. That meeting marked the final shift. The son who once bent over backwards for a family that never saw him was gone. In his place stood a man who understood his worth and wouldn't settle for anything less again. In the 6 months following Alex's decision to walk away, Wilson Family Plumbing became a shadow of its former self. Once a respected name in the region, the company now limped along with only 3 functioning trucks and a significantly reduced staff. Earl, worn down by the mounting failures, had begun stepping back from operations entirely. Travis, once the golden son who coasted on favoritism, was now learning the trade from the ground up, forced to do what Alex had done for over a decade without recognition. Meanwhile, Alex was thriving. At Brighton, his contributions were valued from day one. He had already closed 3 major commercial contracts and received a substantial bonus for his efforts. With his improved salary and manageable hours, he bought a modest new home and finally invested in a truck of his own, paid for in full. More than the material gains, though, it was the emotional freedom that marked the biggest change. No longer tethered to a family that had taken him for granted, Alex was building a life that was fully his. Word of Alex's success traveled quickly through industry circles. Suppliers who once served Wilson Family Plumbing now spoke of Brighton with admiration and respect. Even Travis, begrudgingly, began texting Alex with technical questions Alex answered without bitterness, proving that professionalism didn't require personal forgiveness. At family gatherings, the tension was undeniable but gradually softened. Alex no longer sought approval, and his quiet confidence unsettled those who once dismissed him. His mother had stopped trying to guilt him back into the fold, especially after seeing how well he was doing on his own. Even Travis showed signs of humility, slowly realizing that entitlement had been his downfall. For Alex, peace didn't come from watching his family fail. It came from finally choosing himself. He no longer carried the emotional weight of being the dependable one without appreciation. He had left behind the need to prove his worth, and in doing so, built a future where that worth was never in question again. When Alex finally met his father and brother for coffee, the change in them was startling. Earl, once proud and authoritative, now looked haggard and defeated. Travis, who had always carried himself with misplaced confidence, looked like a man unraveling. Dark circles under his eyes, shoulders hunched beneath the weight of responsibility he was never prepared for. The truth was clear. Wilson Family Plumbing was crumbling without Alex. Their numbers spoke for themselves. Revenue down 60%, 3 trucks sold, staff reduced to a skeleton crew, and clients dropping off after botched jobs and missed appointments. Earl admitted through a cracking voice that he had taken Alex for granted, and Travis, avoiding eye contact, confessed he wasn't ready for the role he had been handed. They pushed a folder toward Alex, an offer for 45% ownership, operational control, and a significant salary bump, essentially begging him to return and rescue the company he had helped build. But Alex didn't flinch. That version of him, the loyal son starving for approval, was long gone. He explained, calm and resolute, that he had already found the recognition and opportunity they had refused to give him for 15 years. He wasn't seeking revenge, he was seeking peace, and he had found it in a company that respected him from day one. Despite the emotional weight of the moment, Alex didn't allow it to reopen old wounds. Instead, he offered guidance, recommending qualified technicians, advising on streamlining operations, and suggesting which clients to focus on to rebuild. It wasn't about bitterness anymore. It was about clarity. For once, Travis seemed to grasp what Alex had truly done for the business. His admission, "I thought you were being favored, but I never knew how much you actually carried," came too late, but it was genuine. Alex walked away that day without guilt, without regret. He had not only left a toxic dynamic, but he had also risen above it. And for the first time in years, he wasn't just surviving, he was living with purpose, freedom, and finally, self-respect. As the dust settled from the emotional confrontation with his family, Alex found himself stepping fully into a life that was finally his own. Brighton Plumbing had not only given him a title, it had given him validation. In his new role, he wasn't just another technician. He was a leader, a problem solver, and most importantly, someone whose voice mattered. His ideas were no longer brushed aside or stolen by someone with the right last name. They were respected and implemented. Within just 2 months, Alex had closed 3 major commercial contracts, secured a sizable bonus, and gained enough financial stability to finally buy his own home. It wasn't flashy, but it was his, paid for with earnings that reflected his true worth. Alongside that milestone, he bought himself a new truck, not as a company vehicle handed down like a favor, but one purchased outright, symbolizing his independence. Word about Alex's success traveled fast in the industry. Suppliers mentioned the decline of Wilson Family Plumbing in passing, noting how quickly things had unraveled since he left. But Alex never gloated. He refused to badmouth his family. Instead, he let his results speak for themselves. Where others saw a bitter departure, he saw a necessary evolution. Meanwhile, his former workplace struggled. Their Yelp rating plummeted. Travis was overwhelmed, losing major clients and dealing with internal chaos. Eventually, even the family reached out again. This time, not with pride or entitlement, but with desperate appeals. Yet Alex remained focused on building, not rescuing. The emotional weight he'd carried for years, the ache of seeking approval, the pressure of being the one who always had to hold things together, began to fade. He spent weekends hiking, reconnected with old friends, and even started dating again. Without the constant burden of someone else's expectations, he rediscovered who he truly was. Not just a skilled plumber, but a thoughtful, grounded man with a vision. For the first time in his adult life, Alex didn't feel like someone's shadow. He was no longer the backup plan, the silent workhorse, or the family's emergency fix. He was his own person, living a life defined by choice, respect, and earned success. As Wilson Family Plumbing spiraled into chaos, Alex kept his distance, not out of revenge, but out of necessity. While his family scrambled to salvage what remained, Alex was thriving. His integrity at Brighton Plumbing had earned him the trust of the leadership team, and his efforts were paying off. In just a few months, he was promoted to Commercial Division Manager, overseeing a team and shaping company strategy, something he'd begged for at his father's business but never received. With stability finally within reach, Alex bought a modest house of his own. It wasn't extravagant, but every square foot was a symbol of independence. For the first time, he woke up without dread in his chest. There were no frantic early morning service calls because someone else had dropped the ball. No emotionally manipulative voicemails, just quiet mornings, coffee on the porch, and a schedule he controlled. Despite the peace, he couldn't completely escape the news from his old life. Former co-workers would mention how Travis was cracking under pressure, how customers were defecting in droves, and how Earl, his father, looked older, more defeated with each passing week. One particularly bad day, Travis had botched a hospital contract, causing flooding and a $180,000 loss. 2 technicians quit in the same week. The empire Alex had helped build was crumbling without him, and the very people who took him for granted were finally facing the reality of what they had lost. Even when his mother called crying, even when Travis's fiancée reached out to say he wasn't sleeping, Alex didn't budge. He wasn't cruel. He simply understood that going back would undo all the healing he'd fought for. He had offered everything he had for 15 years, and it had never been enough. So now, he chose himself. The calls changed tone. Desperation replaced entitlement, but Alex kept his focus on his new life, one where he was respected, valued, and in control. He realized that his worth had never depended on whether his family saw it. The right people had seen it all along. As Alex settled into his new role in life, the contrast between past and present became even sharper. While Wilson Family Plumbing faded into a shadow of its former self, Brighton Plumbing was thriving, and so was Alex. He'd gone from the overworked, underappreciated son to a respected leader in his field. The weight of being the family's unsung backbone had been lifted, replaced by the confidence that came from being recognized on merit, not obligation. Meanwhile, back at Wilson, things unraveled. His dad had sold off 3 trucks just to keep the doors open, and Travis, once cocky and careless, was forced to face the reality of running a business he was never prepared for. The calls from his family changed from bitter silence to desperate outreach. "We need to talk" became "please help us." But Alex had nothing left to give, and no interest in going back to a place that only valued him when he was gone. Still, when they finally asked to meet in person, he agreed, curious but detached. At the cafe, he barely recognized them. His dad looked frail, his once pristine appearance now tired and unkempt. Travis seemed shell-shocked, humbled by failure. They pushed a folder across the table, an offer of partnership, operational control, and a substantial salary. It was everything Alex had once begged for. But it was too late. With calm conviction, Alex declined. Not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. "I finally understand my worth," he said. "I won't go backward." The power of that statement wasn't in the words. It was in the fact that, for the first time in his life, Alex truly believed it. He wasn't running from his past. He was choosing his future. He offered advice and referrals, not vengeance. And when he walked away, he left something more powerful than silence, a legacy of what respect, boundaries, and growth really look like. His absence had become the measure of his value, and he wasn't going back. In the months following Alex's firm decision to walk away from his family's plumbing business, his life began to shift in ways he had only once dreamed of. What started as an act of self-preservation evolved into a journey of genuine self-discovery and freedom. No longer tethered to the emotional labor of seeking validation from a father who had never truly seen him or a brother who had coasted through life on favoritism, Alex was finally building something that was his and his alone. His work at Brighton Plumbing continued to flourish, Kevin, his boss, quickly became a mentor and trusted ally, valuing not only Alex's technical expertise but also his ethical compass and leadership style. Alex's systems were adopted company-wide, his client relationships opened new doors, and his reputation grew beyond just the best plumber in the county. He was now being seen as a visionary, someone who could grow and run a successful branch or even an entire company. And when Kevin quietly mentioned his plans to retire in a few years, offering Alex the chance to eventually buy out the business, something clicked. For the first time, Alex began imagining a future he had once given up on. Being his own boss, leading his own team, choosing the color of the trucks, the name on the building, the company values etched on every invoice. But this time, it wouldn't be Wilson Blue. It would be something entirely new, entirely his. There were still moments of reflection, sometimes sadness. Family dinners with his parents had been replaced with quiet evenings with close friends. Holiday texts from his mom came now and then, mostly polite, sometimes tinged with regret. Travis, to his credit, was trying to rebuild, though he still occasionally reached out with questions Alex answered without resentment. The past had left its mark, but it no longer defined him. Alex had finally reclaimed the narrative of his life, not by fighting for scraps of respect, but by walking away and building something better. The silence that once haunted him was now filled with purpose, peace, and the hum of progress. He hadn't just left a family business, he'd chosen to build a legacy on his own terms. One of the most powerful lessons from Alex's story is this: loyalty without recognition becomes self-sacrifice, and sacrifice without appreciation breeds quiet resentment. For 15 years, Alex gave everything he had to a family business that saw his work as a given, not a gift. He poured in time, effort, and expertise, building the company from the ground up, only to be overlooked in favor of his less qualified younger brother. And while many of us are taught that family comes first, this story forces us to reevaluate at what cost. This isn't just about a truck, it's about dignity. It's about knowing your worth and having the courage to walk away when you're consistently undervalued. Alex's journey speaks to anyone who's ever been the dependable one, the responsible child, the go-to person who rarely asks for anything but gives endlessly. It's a wake-up call for people stuck in toxic family dynamics where love is conditional, praise is rare, and loyalty is one-sided. When Alex finally left, he didn't just walk away from a job, he reclaimed his identity. And through that courageous step, he opened the door to new opportunities, professional growth, and most importantly, inner peace. He didn't need revenge. His success became the proof of his value. He didn't burn bridges, but he didn't look back either. And that distinction makes all the difference. This story challenges us to ask, are we staying in places, jobs, relationships, or roles because we're truly valued or because we're afraid of what happens if we choose ourselves for once? Choosing yourself is not selfish. In fact, it might be the most honest act of self-respect you can offer. To anyone feeling stuck, underappreciated, or taken for granted, this story is your permission slip. You are allowed to leave. You are allowed to grow. You are allowed to demand better.